Hi Pep Stars, this is Miss Boyne. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to look at the 2023 Grade 5 Science Performance Task, and we're going to get right into the video. Please do then share with all your colleagues, all your friends, everyone that you know during the Grade 5 examination. They can benefit from this very valuable information. So let's start sharing the paper. Introduction to task, the tomato garden. Best friends Jenna and Patrick would like to start a tomato garden. However, they are not sure of which method of growing food to use. Patrick believes adding chemical fertilizers to the soil is the best way to increase the mass and the number of tomatoes produced, while Jenna believes that adding chicken manure to the soil will increase the mass and the number of tomatoes produced. Jenna and Patrick plan to carry out an investigation to determine which method of growing food is best. They have asked for your help You will need to help plan a scientific investigation, provide an explanation for changes observed during the investigation, make a recommendation about which method of growing food is better for increasing the mass and the number of tomatoes, use data as evidence to suggest a disadvantage with using the method of growing food that was recommended. Part 1, Jenna and Patrick's investigation plan. Use the information below to answer questions 1 and 2. For their investigation, Jenna and Patrick decided to place one tomato seedling in a pot containing soil only, pot A. Place one tomato seedling in a pot containing a mixture of soil and chemical fertilizer, pot B. Place one tomato seedling in a pot containing a mixture of soil and chicken manure, pot C. Then count and weigh the tomatoes produced by each plant at the end of 12 weeks. Jenna and Patrick's investigation setup. So we can see the tomato seedlings in the different pots. Pot A, pot B, and pot C. And we see that pot A is soil only, and pot B is the soil and the chemical fertilizer, and pot C is the soil plus the chicken manure. Which method of growing food was used in pot C? So the method of growing food that was used in pot C is organic farming. So with organic farming, we use organic fertilizers such as chicken manure or compost, green manure also. All of these are less harmful to the environment and uses less chemical or no chemical at all. The box below shows an unfinished hypothesis written by Jenna and Patrick. Use it to answer question 2. If tomato plants are grown using chemical fertilizers, then they will. Which statement is which statement would likely complete Jenna and Patrick's hypothesis? Share the correct response. They will produce nicer looking and heavier tomatoes, healthier tomatoes that taste better, heavier tomatoes in larger amounts, nicer looking tomatoes that taste better. So based on what the investigation stated earlier, what they really want to do is increase the mass and the number of tomatoes. So we can say that they want heavier tomato in larger amount. Let's see. Patrick wrote some steps to be included in the method of the investigation. He needs your help to determine if the steps are correct. Read each step in the table below carefully, then shade the appropriate circle in each row to indicate whether the steps are correct or incorrect. Patrick's step. Correct, incorrect. Let's look at the first step. Plant one type of tomato seedling in pot A and plant a different type of tomato seedling in pot B and C. So that's incorrect because that wouldn't be a fair test. Use tomato seedlings that are similar in size and number of leaves. Seems to be correct. Let's check. Ensure that seedlings are in all feedback pots receive the same amount of sunlight daily. That seems to be correct. Water pot A every day in the morning, water pot B and C every day in the afternoon. Yes, you don't want anything to be differing because if it differs, it's not going to be a fair test. So that step is incorrect. All of them should be watered at the same time if we want to produce the same. Or test which one would produce a different result based on its own characteristics, but not something else that you can add. So you don't want to change the variable. All right, let's look at the next question. Part 2, observation. Jenna and Patrick's investigation lasted 12 weeks. During that time, they recorded data on the number of organisms seen in the soil, in each pot. The table below shows the data they recorded. Use it to answer questions for A and for B. So we're seeing the table there, showing the number of organisms seen in the soil over 12 weeks. So based on the examination, what I'm looking at, I can say that part A, over the 12 weeks, the number of organisms has been pretty consistent. There's only 1 week where it differed, and that's week 3. But for part B, it's decreasing. The number of soil organisms is decreasing. And part C is pretty much the same. The only week that there was a change was week 6. So it says, state what would likely happen to the number of organisms in part A if the investigation lasted another 3 weeks. The organism might just stay the same. If I'm seeing that would likely happen, really wouldn't change. Because after the first week it was 12, and the third week it came to 11, but then 3 weeks after it went back to 12, and then week 9 it consistently stayed at 12. So what would likely happen? Let me just write that down. It is likely that the number of organisms in part A would remain at 12. And you could say remain constant, but I could just say remain at. All right, explain the likely cause for the decrease in the number of organisms in that was observed in part B. So we know part B is the one with the chemical fertilizer. So that could be a likely cause why the number of organisms is decreasing, because the organisms do not like to live in the environment with the chemical fertilizer. So I can say that it is likely that the chemical fertilizer in part B is making the soil less favorable. You can use different terms. These are just my words. Favorable to the soil organism. So in long and short, they don't like that soil because of chemical fertilizer. This is using this American spelling, and that's what it looks like. But we use English spelling, so it will be, I'll leave it with you. All right, let's move on to number 5. And this is part 3, the results and the conclusion. At the end of the investigation, Jenna and Patrick created the bar graph shown below. Graph 1 shows the number of tomatoes produced by each plant, and graph 2 shows the average mass per tomato produced by each plant. Use the graph to answer questions 5 and 6. Graph 1. And this graph shows the number of tomatoes produced by each plant. And part A, with no fertilizer, produced 5 tomatoes. Part B, with the chemical fertilizer, produced 10 tomatoes. And part C, with the chicken manure, produced 7 tomatoes. Let's look at graph 2. Graph showing average mass per tomato produced by each plant. So the average mass per tomato for part A was 70 grams, and for part B and C, both of them produced an average mass of 90 grams. It says tick the box below to show which method of growing food would you recommend that Jenna and Patrick use. So based on the investigation, Jenna and Patrick wants to see which method of growing food increases the mass of the tomato and also produces more tomatoes, increase the amount of tomatoes produced. And based on the graph, it would show that the method that would be best for them to use is the chemical fertilizer mixed in the soil. Then let me just write that recommendation there. Based on the requirements of the investigation, to produce a greater map and increase the number of tomatoes, then it would be best for Jenna and Patrick to use the chemical fertilizer mix Let me just read it if it makes complete sense. Based on the requirements of the investigation to produce a greater mass and increase the number of tomatoes, then it would be best for Jenna and Patrick to use the chemical fertilizer mix in this. All right, so let's go on to the final question. Jenna and Patrick would like to know of any disadvantages or disadvantage that might come with a growing method you recommended. One disadvantage Jenna and Patrick should consider if they decide to use the method of growing food you recommend. So there are many disadvantages of using chemical fertilizers. It's not good for the soil, it's not good for the environment. Essentially, it's not good for the humans who are consuming it if it's consumed too early, because chemical might be still lingering on these plants, and we can go into a whole discussion about that. But I'm going to just state one disadvantage, and that it's not safe. Let me just try to coin it. Safe for environment. As over time, it's going to elaborate a little bit. It affects the quality of the soil, affects the quality of the soil. All right, that should suffice. You may have different disadvantage, but essentially once you state a disadvantage of using non-organic farming, then you should be. All right, so there you have it. That's the end of the Science Performance Task 2023. Grade 5 Science Performance Task. I hope you found this video very informative. Share with all your classmates and friends that you know who are doing the grade 5 examination, so they can be adequately prepared for the examination next week. Until next time, please just remember to put your best foot forward and exhaust yourself. I know we're all tired of stressing everyone out, teachers and students alike. So we just want to continue pushing until we are at the end. And that's when we've achieved our goal, and literally the day after the examination. And just rest, because it's gonna be finished and we've already put in all that hard. All right. So continue to prepare, continue to be resilient, continue to push forward. All right. I'll see you in the next video.